Amen. Wow. You guys sounded amazing for being here on the first day of football season. I'm proud of you all singing like that. Plus, we have 140 women at our women's retreat. Women, if you couldn't go, I'm sorry. All I can say is next year, because I hear it's been incredible. Men, you weren't invited in the first place, so I'm glad you're here. And I've seen men around town this weekend from our church, and they look a little lost without their spouse. I'm going to be honest with you. I saw one buying a pizza. You know, he didn't know what to do for dinner. He's not going to cook, that's for sure. I saw two guys at the Perry High football game, and neither of them had high schoolers. They had about 10 elementary girls with them. I said, the girls wanted to come to the game. They said, we don't know. We had to get out of the house, so we're here. That's how it's been. But I hear really neat things, and excited that our women get to do that. Well, today we're continuing a series that we started last week titled Seeds of Growth, and we're talking about what it means to be shaped and formed spiritually. And I have this title, People Grow in Groves, and So Do Trees. Now, hopefully you catch the pun that we're in a church right now, at a church called The Grove. But there's an ecology fact that trees in orchards, trees in groves, trees in clusters are more healthy than trees that stand by themselves. That's a fact of nature. For example, there's a golf course just down the road here called Lone Tree Golf Course. Maybe you've played it. And I played it for years, and I think it's on the 9th or the 18th hole. At the tee box is this old, crooked, rugged tree. And there's not a lot of trees out there. So as you play the course, you go, oh, that's the lone tree that was here, the only one in this part of Arizona. And then about 2 years ago, there's a monsoon, and it blew down. So Lone Tree doesn't even have one tree, because lone trees don't do so well by themselves. And so it's the same ecology for our spirituality. We grow much better with friends. We grow much better spiritually with other godly men and women around us. So that's the idea I want to talk about this morning. There are really 5, we're just going to talk about one of 5 aspects of our spirituality. Christian educators and people who study spiritual formation will talk about 5 aspects of the human personality, 5 components to who we are. And in each of those life areas, we develop and form spiritually. So today we're going to talk about the relational aspect of our faith. Next week we'll talk about the fact that God made us to be physical people with physical bodies. And so you've heard us use language like your body is a temple. We'll talk about that. After that, we want to talk about how God made us to be people who love. And there's this emotional component to us, to love God with all our heart. And then there's an intellectual component. God made us to be people with minds who can reason and understand. There's a cognitive part of who we are. And then finally, there's an ethical part of each person's soul. We can tell right from wrong, justice from injustice. And we'll talk about that issue. But this morning, we'll start with the relational component of our faith. God made us to be social beings. And so I have this key idea on the screen, and you can just take this thought home with you today. God made people to be social. We need each other. We learn from each other. And when we come close, we influence the growth of one another. Close personal friendships powerfully influence and shape our spirituality. So that's really, in a nutshell, what we'll be talking about this morning. You see, from the very first lines in Genesis, we understand that God made us to be relational social people. We lean onto and into each other. For example, He looked at Adam, and he says, it's not good for a man to be alone. You know, he'll become the Unabomber, something like that. And so he forms a woman. It's the same for women. It's the same. We need godly, not just a spouse, but we need godly men and women in our lives. We need friends who see the best in us, friends who pull the best out of us. I think a lot of times we try to do life alone. If I ask you this question, do you have a friend who, when life is dark, they show up? Do you have a friend that when you need wisdom or advice, they call you and they have just the perfect words? A lot of people do not. A lot of Americans and American Christians do not have close personal friends. That's just a fact. 43% of Americans say they have very few close friends. 70% say they only have one personal or close personal friend. 70% of Americans, that's most of us in this room, only have one friend. We hope to change that at the Grove. And so today I want to talk about the idea of how relationships influence our lives by talking about safe and unsafe friends. Safe friends and dangerous friends. Because there are some friends that the closer you get to them, the more likely they are to hurt you. You know them. You want to tell me their names, I think. Church historically was known as a sanctuary, right? When I grew up, we would go in the sanctuary. In the sanctuary, you were not supposed to run, chew gum. I couldn't hit my brother, none of those things in the sanctuary because God was there. The word sanctuary means a place of refuge, a place of safety. Church was supposed to be that place. But over the course of my 25 plus years as a pastor, I've seen church become a very dangerous place sometimes for people. I worked with one pastor in another state. He left to go to the Olympics with his sons during the summer. While he was gone, some men got together and decided they didn't want him to be their pastor anymore, so they called for a vote of no confidence. While he's out of the country, he can't even defend himself. And then someone planted a for sale sign in his front yard. That's just mean. Church people did all of that. When I first started in ministry, I was a college pastor in LA, and I inherited a group of student leaders. And they weren't just leaders, they had given themselves titles, different positions of authority. They had named themselves like president and vice president and secretary of state, things like that. I'm not making this up. And so I come to one of the first Bible studies I'm leading, and the president brought a can with nails. Now, I asked Paul Gunther, can you get me a can with nails? And he shows up with this. You know, this is like a railroad spike. I don't know what he's building with this. It's not going to go well. But he brought me, that's nails and this can. So the kid has nails and a can. Now, this is the same kid who asked the previous youth pastor every week when he saw him, did you have your quiet time today? This is that kind of kid, right? And so he has the can and the nails, and then he passes out the nails to everyone in the room. And he's got an empty can, and then he says, we're going to start the can around the room now. I want you to drop a nail in and point at another person in the room and tell us what you don't like about them. That wasn't true. I impeached the president. I impeached him after that. Who needs that? You know, we end up in churches that are dangerous and unsafe, and we create guilt and shame trying to get people to conform. And the church was never meant to be like that. At the Grove, we hope to change that because Jesus modeled something much different. My point as we start out is that our faith is extremely relational. Sometimes we think that spiritual growth involves the disciplines like Bible reading, prayer, Bible memorization, fasting. Yes, those are all good. And we forget that what forms us in a very significant way are the people around us. Relationships play a critical role in our spiritual formation. Of all the people we should look at in history to learn how to relate to others and why it's so critical to our spiritual formation, we need to look at the life of Jesus Christ. Because first, Jesus modeled what it meant to be a godly friend to others and to mentor and disciple and for them to breathe into each other's lives. He had 12 friends, right? And 3 of them I'm going to call his safe friends. You know their names, Peter, James, and John. These 3 safe friends he would take with him when things got really desperate. Like there was a girl who had died, and if you've ever had to do something really tough, you need your safe friends with you. And he asked just Peter, James, and John, would you come with me into this girl's bedroom? And then he picks her up. When it's dark in the garden at night and they want to kill him, he takes 3 friends with him to pray, Peter, James, and John. When he goes up on a mountain for some some time with God, some intimacy with God, he takes with him Peter, James, and John. Those are his safe friends. We all need friends like the friendships Jesus modeled. He also taught often about friendships. Here's one line that he shares in John chapter 15, verse 12. He says, "Love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for a friend." He often taught about friends. But understand this, God uses friends to heal us, to protect us. God uses your friends to answer your prayers. God uses them, and he uses them to grow you. The problem is, many times even Christians try to do life alone. And anytime you do life alone, it never feels good, does it? I remember being on a trip to Nashville, and I had meetings during the day, but then everyone who I was meeting with was busy at dinner, so I end up going to dinner by myself. So I picked my favorite restaurant, P.F. Chang's. And I go to P.F. Chang's, and I put my name in, but it's like a Friday night, and there's like a 30-minute wait. And there's a room full of people. And I'm there waiting, minding my own business, right? Just minding my own business. When I had given her my first name, I don't know why I use that more than Chinchen. They mispronounce it when I say Chinchen, so I said Palmer. So the hostess finally walks into this crowded waiting room of people, and she announces this. She says, "Palmer, party of one, follow me." I was like, what? I just want to drop my head in shame. Party of one, that's not a party. What's happening? What's happening there? I've been watching the U.S. Open, right? The finals are today. And it made me think of Andre Agassi. I've read his autobiography. Andre Agassi says this. He says, "Tennis is the most lonely sport in the world." He said tennis because even in golf, you're in a twosome or you're in a foursome, but tennis, you're on the side of the court by yourself. He said in tennis, I always wished I had a team that I could count on. He said even if you're leading in the last set, you don't know if you can finish it. You have to play every point out. The clock never expires. So you just have to keep playing. He says tennis was lonely. He says, "I can't tell you how often I wished I had a team around me." Tennis, you can't even talk to your coach. You can't even motion to your coach. And at least a golfer has a caddy, when they're playing alone. Sometimes, my point is, we try to do our spirituality alone. We try to grow on our own. We try to follow God on our own. And it's really hard. It's so much better, so much more rich and fulfilling when we pursue God with close personal friends. And so that's why I'm trying to establish as we start that relationships are extremely critical to who we are spiritually and our spiritual formation. I say adults try to do our spirituality alone. I've worked with students, and if you know high school students, for example, or junior high students, they love doing their faith with others. When I was a junior high pastor, if I said, "We're going to Magic Mountain this weekend," and if I ask a student, "So are you coming Saturday night?" Do you know what their first question always was? It wasn't, "How much does it cost?" Or it wasn't, "What day are we going?" It was always, "Well, who's coming?" Because if their friends were coming, then they were coming. If their friends were not coming, then they didn't want to come either. Spiritual friends, as we're talking about this morning, I'll describe the best kind of friends like this. They become life-giving. I really feel that. And I don't say that loosely. I've watched in our own courtyard, and I know this just happens by mistake, but sometimes I'll see a circle of friends talking. And if you watch a circle of friends, their shoulders are usually pretty close. And then I've watched, I'm sure by mistake, someone comes up to the edge of the circle of love and trust, and they stand there hoping that two shoulders will part and someone will say, "Hey, how's your day going?" And I've watched a person stand there and no one recognizes them, no one acknowledges them, and then they drop their head and they walk away. I've seen that. I say godly relationships are life-giving because when someone embraces us and welcomes us in and says, "Let's do life together," it changes everything. I've seen this even at casual gatherings and parties. Have you ever been invited to like a company dinner or someone's birthday party, and you You show up there, and you realize quickly you don't know anybody there. You know the host and the hostess, but they're busy hostessing and hostessing. And so you're standing there with a red Solo cup, and it has iced tea in it. We're in church. And so it's a red Solo cup, and you're nursing it and looking at it like it's the most interesting thing in the world, right? And maybe you have a nasty snack, some kind of hors d'oeuvre in your hand, and you don't even want to eat it, but you just are paying attention to both of these because you know nobody. And then you see someone coming towards you, and you start thinking, oh no, they're going to say, why are you here? You know, who invited you? I don't recognize. You think the worst thing. And then the person comes up and they say, hi, my name's Al. What's your name? And you say, well, my name's Bob. And he says, well, Bob, tell me your story. Tell me about yourself. And you start to do that. And then this new friend says, hey, come with me. Let me introduce you to some people. And they take you over, and the shoulders spread, and this friend says, let me introduce you to my new friend, Bob. He's the most interesting man in the world. He's been skydiving in New Zealand. You know, they're telling things like, they're making it up and lying, but that's fine. Because all of a sudden, you've been accepted, and you've been welcomed in. That's the kind of place that we always have dreamed the Grove could be. And if you've been on the outside, on the fringe looking in, then it's time for you to start to invest in godly relationships, godly friendships, because it's the only way you're going to grow and grow deep. Solomon, the wise king, he says this. This is Ecclesiastes 4:12. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. So he says two is better. But then he says the best is a cord of 3 strands cannot easily be broken. Okay, so I said we're going to talk about safe friends and dangerous friends today. Jesus had both of those. I'm going to go with one of my favorite of his safe friends was Peter, because he was so unpredictable. So I hope I can be like Peter. And he was bold. And then you have, who is his unsafe, dangerous friend? Judas. All right, there's just one bad man in the whole group, but there's 12 of them, and Judas. So here's what we read in Luke chapter 22. You can open your Bibles and follow along, verse 47. While Jesus was still speaking, understand he's in a garden, it's at night. He'd been praying with his 3 safe friends, and a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? You know, ute brute, are you kidding me? 49, when Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike him with a sword? And one of them, later we read, Peter, strikes the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. But Jesus answered, no more of this. Have you ever had a friend like this, an unsafe, dangerous friend? Have you ever thought, why are my friends not there when I need them most? Why do they hurt me with their words? Why can I not trust any of them? There's some of them. There's an ancient Hebrew word that's used to describe friends like that. Maybe you've studied a little bit of Hebrew and you'll recognize this word. It's frenemy. And in the book of Hezekiah, right, we read about frenemies. But, okay, so frenemies, this is true. This is what your junior highers call people you can't trust. Here's a description of frenemies like Judas. Whenever you have good news, theirs is always better. You're going to San Diego, they're going to Hawaii. Okay, here's another one. They constantly brag about themselves, just can't stop talking about themselves. Instead of assuring you that your goals and dreams will come true, they tell you why they'll fail. They always see the worst in things. How about this? Frenemies, everything is a competition with them. You have a new purse, they buy the Michael Kors bag. You buy a car, they buy a newer car. And then here's one last one. They're the best at giving you backhanded compliments. Oh, I see you bought a new outfit. I love how you're not so obsessed with style. Who needs friends like that? I brought with me a rat trap because Some friends are dangerous like this. So this last Wednesday night, Byron wanted to illustrate how you need to listen and trust some people, and some people are like rats. And so this was Paul Gunther's idea for him. So if you're wondering where the rat trap came from. And so they put rat traps all over the stage, and then they blindfolded one of his staff and had her walk through the rat traps. And he was telling her 2 steps left, 1 step straight, and she managed to miss most of them. But when I saw the trap, I was like, who bought this? This is like a small bear trap. And they sell them for mice. This is like from Detroit or something. I don't know where the rats are like this big. I about took my finger off fooling with that thing. But some friends are like rats, aren't they? And you think they're your friend, and then they turn out to be your enemy. Some friends are toxic and dangerous. Have you ever been hurt by a friend? Have you ever had a friend break your confidence, exclude you when they should have included you, or fail to be there when you needed them most? I think even church people experience those kinds of relationships. I'm going to go through rather quickly some of the qualities of unsafe people. The first one I have is that unsafe people pretend. Doesn't it seem like they pretend that life is better than it is? They pretend that their kids are perfect, their kids brush their teeth without anyone asking and do their homework and don't play Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 3, none of those things. And all of those things happen in their house. And they just pretend that they have life together, and they're not open, and they're not transparent, and they're not vulnerable because they're busy pretending. Unsafe friends tend to do that. But write this down. Think about this. Authentic spirituality means that we learn to open up with people who we are close to and who we can trust about our struggles and about our difficulties and our challenges. Unsafe friends will break your confidence. Here's what Solomon says again in Proverbs 11:3. A gossip goes around telling secrets, but those who are trustworthy can keep a confidence. Isn't a friend who you can trust with the things that are going on the inside, they're extremely valuable. But some friends will break your confidence. As soon as you leave the room, it seems like they're telling someone else what's going on in your life. You don't need so many friends like that. I was going shopping for my wife's birthday once, and I invited a friend to go with me, and it was winter in Chicago, and our wood floors were cold, so it's a strange gift, but I was looking for an oriental rug for her to put by the bed, and we found one. It was perfect, and I was so excited about this gift, but then as we're walking back into our house, this friend says to Veronica, "He just bought you a rug." And I was like, what? Who are you? And my wife could see I was getting irritated. She said, "Palmer, your son Spencer is only 3 years old. You can't expect him to keep a secret." And I'm going, yeah, you're 3, but what kind of friend are you? But some friends are like 3-year-olds, aren't they? It seems like they can't keep confidence when you need it, and you can't trust them. Be very careful around those kinds of friends. Unsafe friends tend to be more religious than spiritual. Jesus had no space for those kinds of friends in his life. They had titles like Pharisee and Sadducees, and he called them hypocrites. Some of your friends, even church friends, will know a lot of the Bible, and they will know their theology well. But they are not safe because they're more obsessed with impressing people with what they know than with actually being a godly friend. Be very careful around those people. Unsafe friends keep saying, "I'm sorry," but it seems like they never change. Unsafe friends are undependable. Look at Luke chapter 21. We don't have to go there, but Jesus has been arrested. He's being taken to Pilate's house. We read that the disciples, they scatter, except for Peter, who stays close, kind of at a distance. Here's what Proverbs, again, Solomon says this. He has some of the best words on friends. Proverbs 18:24. There are unreliable friends, but then there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Some friends will abandon you when you need them most, but some friends are dependable and will be there when you need them. I think maybe part of the problem in this, as we look at it, is that maybe we skim too much on our relationships. Maybe we're trying to invest in too many people, and so our relationship stays shallow. Can I challenge you to find 2 or 3 or 4 very close friends to invest in that you can talk about your soul with? Because sometimes we have friends from our neighborhood, friends from work, friends from your kids' t-ball practice, friends from your kids' school, friends from past neighborhoods you lived in, friends from church, your relatives' friends, and there's just too many. And instead, Solomon says, find a friend who will stick closer than a brother or closer than a sister. Finally, I have unsafe friends are takers. They are critics and they are takers. That's Judas. Think about this. In John chapter 12, we read about this instance where a woman interrupts dinner, pours this expensive perfume on Jesus' feet, and Judas, what does he do? Instead of praising her, he criticizes her, and he says, hey, I could have sold that, and the money we could have used to do so many things for the poor, and people knew he was just going to take it. And finally, he sells Jesus, he betrays him for 30 pieces of silver. So that's our list of qualities of unsafe friends. But then, where we want to head this morning is there are godly people who are not dangerous, but godly people you can trust. And so here's a few qualities of safe friends as we'll describe them today. Safe people who I think we all need in our lives. The first one is safe friends let you be you. So I want to turn to John chapter 21. And in John chapter 21, we have this exchange between Jesus and one of his most safe friends, Peter. Now, Peter had betrayed him 3 times at Pilate's house, and Jesus comes back. And he just wants to know that they're still close. And so listen to the question he keeps asking Peter. Verse 15, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my sheep. 16, again Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And then Jesus restores him, restores the friendship and the relationship, puts him back in ministry, and he says, feed my sheep. Jesus did not keep the bar up here for Peter. Safe friends let you be you. You don't have to be perfect in order for them to accept you and love you. Jesus didn't come back to Peter and say, do you promise to never do it again? He doesn't even say, why did you do it? He doesn't say, what's wrong with you, Peter? He doesn't judge him. Some friends only judge and shame and guilt us. Some friends, the best friends, redeem us and bring us back to God, and that's what's happening here. The best kinds of friends I have here allow you to be you, because there's some things about you that make you who you are. Years ago, when my kids still jumped in jumping castles, we rented a jumping castle, and I had boys and girls, and the boys were slamming the girls in the jumping castle. You know how they do that? They body slam them. And so I had to separate them and say, okay, we're going to go 10 minutes for the girls, 10 minutes for the guys, and rotate and take turns. Well, the guys had their 10 minutes, and then they were out. I put the girls in. They'd been in there for 2 or 3 minutes, and then I've got my sons coming over. Dad, get the girls out. I go, no, their time's not up. They said, but look at them, Dad. They're not bouncing in the bouncing castle. And I walked over to the bouncing castle, and sure enough, like 8 of them had huddled in a corner, sat down, and were chatting. And they said, Dad, they have to bounce. If they're in there, they have to bounce or get them out. And I was like, no, this is their 10 minutes. And if they want to waste my money and your time, then we're going to let them, okay? Because that's who they are. And that's what they want to do. I'm not going to make them perform and bounce for you. Some friends want you to perform and bounce, and you don't have to. And that's how it was with Jesus. Safe friends do not have conditions. They don't put conditions on the relationship. Peter, what's he do? I think Peter often tried to perform so that Jesus would like him more. I think that's why he pulls out the sword and he cuts the man's ear off, and Jesus is going, you don't have to do that. You don't have to keep doing things like that. Safe friends bring out the very best in you. Friends are not neutral, all right? I think friends in life are either a spiritual asset or they are a spiritual liability. They either bring out the best in you or they bring out the worst in you. Aren't there some friends that when you're around them, you leave feeling irritated and annoyed? There are some friends that make you the worst kind of person, and they talk you into doing the worst kinds of things and having the worst attitudes. But then there are some friends that for every hour it seems like you spend with them, you're closer to God, and you're a better man, or you're a better woman, or you're a better husband, or you're a better wife, or a better mother. Those are the kinds of friends. The best kinds of friends bring out the very best. I have next, safe friends encourage us. Here's what happens in the life of David if we go all the way back to 1 Samuel. David is being chased by his best friend's father. His best friend is Jonathan, and Jonathan's father, Saul, wants to kill David. And so David goes on the run out in the desert. He ends up in a cave, hiding in the desert in a dark cave. 1 Samuel 22. 1, we read, David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down there to him. So think about this. So David's having the worst week of his life, and he's hiding in a dark cave. And what do his best friends do and his family do? They don't stay home. They go find him in his dark cave, and they sit there with him. And then finally, if you keep reading, they walk out with him. And they give him courage, and he challenges Saul, and he takes on Saul because of the men and the people around him. We all need friends like that. They don't just encourage us, they give us courage. You'll have some friends that sap you of courage and tell you you can't do it, but then the best kind of godly friends will breathe courage into your life and tell you, yes, you can. God made you to do that. The last piece that I have here is that safe friends move us toward God. I think there are friends that like I said, for every moment we spend with them, we move just 1 millimeter closer to God. It seems like with every hour we spend with them, we are more honest and we pray more and we love God more because of the friends that we're spending time with. When we mess up in life, they hold us accountable. They don't spread that news with others. They don't shame us. They don't deal in guilt and shame. They simply are there to redeem us and to move us toward God. I say all of that this morning because I don't know if you have a friend like that. I think many, many Christian men and women try to go through life trying to follow God on their own. We forget that our spirituality is not just shaped by reading the Bible and prayer. It's shaped by the people around us, that people move us toward God, and people help form us who we are. Maybe you don't have a friend like that. Maybe you haven't been a friend like that. My challenge this morning is to find a godly man or a godly woman who will breathe into your life, and then you can speak into their life. And in the end, both of you are shaped to be more like Christ.